Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of premium quality guitar, bag, and camera straps, handmade in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Check out their website to order your own custom creation and play in style. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it.
Hey y'all, it's Shitpost Friday.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Bradley Guitarologist here. It's time for Shitpost Friday. First up in the news, this Shitpost Friday, I wanted to cover this story, which is asking us, beckoning us to decide whether to relic or not to relic our acoustic guitars. I have just one thing to say about this as far as relicing acoustic guitars. No, 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 no. That's about the stupidest thing you could possibly do to an acoustic guitar, start relicing it, as far as I'm concerned. Now, they actually, if you read this article, they consider treating wood before building the guitar a form of relicing, which I disagree with. The process is actually called torrefying, but that's not really what relicing is as far as I'm concerned. But they're also talking about the other style of relicing, you know, hitting it with keys and scratching it up and trying to crackle the finish and all these things. I will say this. I will say that old acoustic guitars do have what I would consider a mojo to them, more so than electric guitars by far. Electric guitars really, you don't gain very much by age. I mean, you do get some different feelings as far as when you pick something up and it feels very worn in, and you get the back of the neck, you know, the finish is all kind of worn off a lot of times, and somebody has loved the hell out of this particular neck or something, and you could tell that on an electric guitar. But does it really change the tone of the thing, the fact that it's older? No, probably not really. If anything, you know, magnets lose strength over the years, particularly if they're Alnico, and probably if a magnet has lost strength, you're just losing signal, therefore you're losing tone. So as electric guitars tend to age, they would tend to sound worse the older that they get. But as far as acoustics go, there are some benefits, I would argue, to having an older acoustic guitar, but not necessarily one that's just been beaten up to look beaten up. I was reading an article a long time ago in a magazine about violins. I think it was called Violin Player or Magazine or something like that. But they had analyzed a lot of ancient violins from makers like Stradivarius, and they had found that one of the commonalities of violins that tend to have the best tone, according to, you know, experts, which that's a whole nother kettle of worms there, but they did tend to notice some similarities. One was the fact that they had gotten their original wood from this certain place, in Italy, that had a certain temperate climate and so forth. The growth patterns were very close seasonally. So, you know, the rings in these particular trees that they had cut down during this time were different. But also they found that there was a certain type of mold that existed inside of the instruments on the wood itself that seemed to be affecting the tone. And if you have ever gotten an older acoustic guitar that's not even 100 years old yet, if you smell inside of the sound hole, oftentimes you will smell a very, very musty, very musky, funky kind of a smell that is kind of akin to something that is beginning to mold in a way. So there could be all kinds of organic things going on the surface of an older instrument that kind of tends to mellow out the tone, and I would argue does tend to make older acoustic guitars sound a bit better. Also, as acoustic guitars age, the moisture that is inside of the guitars when they're new tends to seep out and kind of go away, so that you don't have water in the wood the same way you would a newer instrument, which is the whole concept of what torrefying is all about. But I wouldn't consider that aging. I would just consider that, you know, removing moisture from the wood so that it can't shrink any more than it already is. Therefore, it can't tend to crack. You know, because when things tend to shrink, they tend to pull away from other things and they tend to crack, and that creates problems down the road. But if something has been kind of, I guess, pre-stressed in that way, by removing as much of the moisture as you can to stabilize the instrument, you don't have that to worry about. So I wouldn't consider that relicing in any way, shape, or form. But hitting an acoustic guitar with keys and putting gouges in the thing and trying to crackle the finish, and that's another thing that I would argue that actually probably does help in opening up the tone of an acoustic instrument when you have a crazed or cracked finish. For one thing, nitrocellulose lacquers, those kinds of finishes are more forgiving anyway. They allow the instrument to move more freely. But as that finish begins to craze or to crackle on you over time, those little places where there was stress built up, where this finish was trying to move even further but couldn't, has now cracked and can move further. So I would argue that this would actually contribute to the ability of a top to be able to move more freely if the finish is crazed and cracked up. And this is something that happens naturally over time with nitrocellulose lacquers. You can buy a lot of really pretty instruments that have like poly finishes that's basically like a plastic, but that's not doing the instrument very many favors tonally. I would much rather have a guitar that was completely unfinished as to have something like that, as if I'm looking for an open acoustic tone. But yeah, if you're looking for an acoustic tone that is the most projecting and the most open you can possibly find, and when you hit that chord, it just rings out and stays there. Older guitars tend to do this a little more. They also tend to mellow out a little bit more, so you get more of a compressed sound where the strings, from string to string, it's even, where you don't have some of the strings that kind of stick out. The whole instrument seems compressed, and you get that a lot more, I think, with older acoustic guitars. Now that's just me. That's not a scientific thing. I don't know of any scientific test I could even put that to. But from my years of playing, which is almost 30 years, I would say for sure, tone wood in acoustic guitars is a real thing. You can argue the electric side all you want, but there is no arguing the acoustic side. Tone wood is a real thing when it comes to acoustic guitars, and the older an acoustic guitar tends to be, the more it seems to have matured like a fine wine, and I do believe that. But moving on, speaking of guitars and high-valued instruments and all this stuff and vintage instruments, we talk about this quite a lot, and in terms of valuing these sorts of things. Check this out. I would like to know what you guys think about this. Eddie Van Halen is unveiling this new Eruption signature model EVH guitar. One of the perks of buying this is he is personally going to play the song Eruption on each one of these 30 guitars. So he's going to play Eruption 30 different times, and he's going to film it and put it on a little thumb drive and sell the thumb drive with the guitar that he has signed and everything, and personally numbered and all this stuff. And he's putting and including a Van Halen album that he's signing also, and some other, I guess, case candy and all this stuff, and selling it for like what, $25,000 to $30,000. I have nothing against people cashing in on their celebrity. If they have done something special with their lives and they're reaching kind of their latter years or their twilight years, and if they really need the money, or they're having medical expenses come up or things like this, and or eventually they will have medical expenses and stuff come up, and that's a given. I guess if you live in the U.S. like Eddie Van Halen does, we don't have socialized medicine or anything like that, so he's got to take care of himself and his family. I get that. But what do you think about this? An older celebrity kind of cashing in on his younger triumphs. Is this something that we should kind of applaud? Is this something we should look down upon? And what does it say about us if we do look down upon it? What does it really say if we're criticizing basically what amounts to an old man now? That hey man, you're an old man and you're not living up to the promise of your 20s. You know, who does that anyway? Who among us can live up to the promise that we had when we were in our 20s? I mean, granted, we gain a lot of wisdom as we age, but we also lose a lot of things too. You know, we lose some abilities. We lose, I think we lose the ability to see the world in different ways. And, you know, we lose the ability to be creative in certain ways too. Like, you know, I, for instance, I feel like I have lost some abilities. When I was younger, I found it very easy to write lyrics to songs. They would just pop. I mean, they would just come out. They would flow from me, in fact, a lot of times. But, you know, in the past, probably, I don't know, 10 years or something, lyrics are something that you really have to work at, or at least I do. I have to sit down and actually work at it and try to reflect on, you know, who I am and what I've learned and all this stuff. And sometimes it starts to feel pretentious, and I just wad up the paper and I just throw it away and forget that. You know, I'll just play guitar, you know, because that's something that does still flow out. But, you know, all these things that kind of get in the way as we age, that were there perhaps when we were younger, but aren't anymore. You know, and then a guy like Van Halen's kind of cashing in on that younger success that he had with those early Van Halen albums and his instrumental prowess, you know. But I mean, has he really written anything in the past 25 years that's been really worth, you know, going out and buying? I honestly, I don't know, because most of the stuff that I remember from Van Halen is at least 30 years old. So, you know, maybe I'm just behind the times and I haven't been keeping up with him like I should or something. But it just seems to me that, and also maybe it's a marketing thing. Maybe he just doesn't have very good marketing when it comes to Van Halen music or his own solo stuff, if he has any. I just don't happen to know about any of it. The main things that I've heard about have been his business ventures, his guitars and stuff, and you know, stuff like this, where he's charging an arm and a leg for, you know, what amounts to yet another limited edition Van Halen signature guitar. You know, how many times can you do this and kind of go back to that same cash cow? I think I remember hearing something when I was younger. It kind of reminds me of this. Somebody said that they had met Mr. T, because I was a big A-Team fan. That was the other show I watched. I watched The Fall Guy, and I watched Dukes of Hazzard and Knight Rider, and I watched the freaking A-Team. You know, those were my probably my big four as far as shows when I was growing up in the early 80s. And the A-Team, you know, I idolized those guys. You know, I thought Mr. T was cool as shit. And I heard from somebody somewhere, maybe it was in a magazine article or newspaper article or something, but this little kid had gone up to Mr. T and asked him for an autograph. And Mr. T told the little kid, and the little kid was like my age that I was at the time I heard this, you know, that he had to pay him for the autograph. And I just thought to myself, it's like, wow, what an asshole. Like, even as a little kid, I thought, oh, wow, what a douchebag that he would ask a little kid, you know, for $5 or whatever it was to give him his autograph. Which, I mean, makes financial sense if you think about it. You know, you don't want to just sign things for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes along, because you're diluting the value of your autograph at some stage, right? You know, if you want to go to all these signings and you want to, if you want to tour around America and go to conventions or whatever and sit at a table all day and be able to sell your book or sign autographs for people and charge admission or whatever you're going to do, you know, you don't want 100 million of your autographs already out there, so it's not a special thing. So, I mean, I kind of get it, but at the same time, man, it's just screwed up, you know. I mean, as these rock stars and these other celebrities sort of age, they can kind of print their own money in a way. It's like you don't even really have to do anything all that special. You can just hop on some kind of road show and travel around and again sit at a table and sell a little trinket that you've signed or something, and just, I mean, you can eat that way, you know, and probably see the world that way. And probably never have to really do an honest day's labor ever again. So, you know, I get it. but at the same time, it just seems cheap. It seems like a cop out to me. I don't know. What do you think? Here's an interesting one I thought was kind of cool, but then again, I thought was kind of sad in a way. This boy is like 14 years old, sitting in his house, and this rapscallion or ruffian breaks in, and he hears him like going through his mom's drawers and stuff, and he confronts him, and all he's holding is a guitar. He's gonna beat him with his guitar. So it's the only weapon he's got, and the dude like runs away from a guitar. And they eventually caught the guy, but just a word of advice to the little 14-year-old. Yeah, that's probably bad advice. I was gonna say get a gun, but yeah, if you're 14, you probably that's a bad idea.
You've got to ask yourself one question: do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
So yeah, I guess you're kind of screwed. Lock your door. Lock your door, or at least get like an old Jackson or something that has a pointy headstock, so you can stab him with it. One other thing I wanted to talk about was this. Did any of you guys know about this? This is a new Hard Rock hotel and casino that's being built in, where is this? Seminole, Florida. And it's a giant guitar-shaped building. And this particular article is like lampooning this building, calling it something that has blighted the skyline. They are not very nice. Saying they have to get permission from NASA because it's so huge and they can see it from outer space. And Mother Nature hates it because it's been hit by lightning, and they don't like this building, apparently, the locals. But what do you think about this? Is this like... is this one of those things? It's like, okay, Tower of Babel time. It's like guitar has gotten so big. We're making buildings in the shape of guitars now, and it's just kind of jumped the shark, I mean, I'm just asking this rhetorically. I'm not drawing conclusions here. But, apparently they are pissing off locals with this giant guitar-shaped building, which it does look kind of cool. I mean, if you're into guitar, but at the same time, I can see why if you're not into guitar, it might be like somebody erecting down the street from me a giant tuba-shaped building or something. Or it's like, what is that? Oh, it's a bass clarinet. It's just in the shape of a building. That leads me seamlessly segue to this, which is another Hard Rock mishap. But this one is the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City. They attached this giant 30-foot guitar to the side of their building, and only when they've gotten the thing built and up on the side of the building did somebody point out and realize they actually misspelled the word rhythm on the little poker chip. So somebody had to climb up there, I guess, on a scaffold or something, whatever, and do something about that. How are you going to change that once that's up there? I don't have a clue. That would be man, if you were scared of heights, that would not be fun. $500 million they spent to renovate this hotel casino, including this giant guitar, 30-foot guitar. That kind of makes me wonder too, do they have to pay Gibson for using the Gibson logo on the guitar? Does Gibson pay them? How does that arrangement work? What do you think that arrangement should work like? Who should pay who in this scenario? Should the hotel casino pay Gibson? Or should Gibson pay them? Or should it just be a freebie? It's like, okay, we're going to allow you to do this because you're advertising for our brand, because they do actually put the name Gibson on the headstock of these guitars and on these signs, which is interesting because you don't see that very much in the corporate world. You don't see businesses using another business's brand within their own trademark brand, do you? I mean, I've got a Hard Rock Guitar Cafe pin right here, which is, in the shape of, it doesn't say Fender on it, but it's in the shape of a Stratocaster. I mean, it's unmistakably a Stratocaster. But this is different because, this at least doesn't say Fender on it. But this giant guitar, though, in Atlantic City does say Gibson on it. So You tell me, how does that dynamic work out? Who pays who in this scenario? All right, so that concludes Shitpost Friday. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you have, please hit subscribe down below. And for now, y'all take care.